Hello everyone and welcome. Sit back, relax, make a cup of tea or whatever you like to drink and get ready for new stories from Yellowcat. Send your own favorite stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. So subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. Let's get started. What is the most memorable tale you have about your that one coworker's termination? We welcomed a new intermediate level developer to our team. He seemed fine at first and picked things up rather quickly when you explained things to him. As a result, you gave him his own project to work on his own with the understanding that you may ask for assistance if needed. The job could have been completed in less than a week by most of us, but since we all have more than 10 years of experience than this person, we gave him as much time as he needed to complete it since it was a learning opportunity and a means to gauge his level of independence. In the end, he spent more than a month working on this same project. He wasn't really present at work during these weeks, which is okay, but a little awkward for a new employee who isn't quite senior yet and may need some time to get to know his new colleagues. But alright, as long as he performed his duties, nobody really had a problem with it. However, it turns out that he didn't really commit any work at all to the repository while working from home. That's acceptable for a day or two if he's researching or working on a significant project, and even then, frequent commitment is preferable, but he was idle for weeks. Furthermore, our manager isn't in the office on Fridays, so he usually just came in on those days. Management failed to detect any of this somehow. When the man said he was finished, was instructed to publish his adjustments, and the client began to voice complaints, things really started to go wrong for him. At that point, I was requested to investigate the man's work, and I discovered that not only had he purposefully omitted information, but also that the quality of his work was dismal. I was very incensed since I did not understand how this had gone unreported for weeks from a new hire and why our management had instructed him to go live without even bothering to review this worker's work or conduct a formal testing session. To cut a long tale short, the new person was not dismissed in theory because at the time of the collapse, his contract was up for renewal. It was just not renewed. Furthermore, unless they're seniors, my boss is no longer in charge of training new hires because he completely lacks the ability to provide reasonably green staff with the kind of direction they require. Thank goodness I was hired for that position, as I enjoy imparting my experience and consider myself to be a competent mentor. Call center. As you might assume, the policy prohibited using vulgar or offensive language on the call floor, but as long as you muted your line and no one else's microphone picked it up, you were usually okay. It was a practice for some people to practically wear out their mute buttons. One guy had a reputation for destroying the latch mechanism on his mute buttons to the point where they would no longer remain down on their own, back when we had analog mute switches that toggled up or down. That person isn't the subject of this narrative, though. One individual was just unable to figure out how to use the mute button. While I worked in quality assurance at the time, he never said anything on any of the sporadic calls that were pulled for grading that would have warranted an immediate promotion to the customer. However, he did say a lot of things that were worthy of a warning and the occasional comment that would have justified failing the call or flagging it for review by his direct supervisor. While somewhat muffled and softer in comparison, all of these failed calls would still be fully heard and comprehensible. We would repeatedly advise him not to say these things, and in the event that he felt compelled to say something inappropriate, to at least make sure his microphone was muted. We heard a rustling sound in addition to the offensive remarks, which persisted throughout the call but were always a little muted. When one of his customers was reasonably confused about a topic we took for granted, the guy lifted the earpiece from his ear, increasing the distance from the mic to his mouth by at most an inch or two to make an aside to me about the customer. I went to his desk, hooked up a splitter, and sat next to him while he took a few calls. I was skeptical of it. We were in the technical support department. He needs to be familiar enough with everyday technology to grasp how a typical headset operated. However, when I asked him after the call why he hadn't hit the mute button before speaking with me so the client wouldn't hear the pointless remark, he said, "I took off the headset." I played calls back to him to show that you could occasionally hear other calls in the background and that an inch or so of distance was in no way a substitute for the mute button, or better, keeping your mouth shut, but I couldn't hound him on that without being a hypocrite. I explained to him then, and for several graded calls afterward, that moving the headset didn't mute it. He never seemed to use the mute button and only ever seemed to take off his headset even though the entire QA team was trying to explain things to him. That is, I believed. His boss and I stopped by our QA team's workspace one day. They requested that one of us quickly retrieve the man's final call and place it on the network drive of the supervisors. While on the phone, one of us quickly obliged and then listened to the call afterward. Hoo boy, then laughter, then D, he's toast, then guys, you gotta hear this. For whatever reason, our guy was enraged beyond belief and chose to remove his headset instead of muting it, slamming it against his desk. The customer was perfectly reasonable and had asked a very reasonable question for someone who is not familiar with our product. The customer continued to declare that he could hear everything as he loudly spoke obscene and aggressive words that were significantly worse than anything we had heard from him before. Our soon-to-be former employee advanced quickly, orally assuring his own boss that he would locate the customers and hurt them using their contact information. His destiny was sealed by his overtly violent outburst, even if there had been no prior record. He had been a model employee up until then, and he had muted his mic. But every phrase was captured on our recording. There was a man who, to be honest, had a bit of a poor reputation for a lot of things when I worked for a local movie theater. To start with, he smelled like a combination of the strongest cologne and smoke from some awful BO. The man believed he was the worst, but neither managers nor cast leaders disliked him. In fact, he was barred from running for cast leader because he had been attempting to alter work procedures in order to further his own interests. In addition to disparaging managers and calling one manager Chairman Mao after he was disciplined, he also made some racial comments against specific supervisors. He and one of the cast leaders advocated for a union at the theater, which infuriated everyone. Although joining a union cannot get you fired, there are numerous reasons why you could get fired. He would have been sacked much sooner if the world crisis hadn't happened. At the same theater, there was also a major episode when about 10 people were dismissed for preparing food and giving it to their friends for free, breaking their uniforms, and protesting the managers in the process. Yes, they were vaping in the rear as well. In the process, another cast leader and others were sacked in addition to the cast leader who supported the union. Tell me about an awful incident you've had with your HOA. My former condo's HOA was managed by a lone man who was most likely in his 60s or early 70s. His social shyness was the issue. Even though he's a fine enough guy and did a decent job managing the HOA nobody wanted to be a part of. He was clearly unemployed since he walked his dog around the condos all day every day. No dog has to urinate that frequently. He would come over whenever someone got home to discuss urgent matters such as the weather. He was the president of the HOA, and I believe it made him believe that everyone was his best buddy, which made it extremely awkward. I told him to F off, but I was in a hurry to park the car and get inside. Hey, I really do realize that you're lonely and you may be unhappy over whatever's gone wrong in your life. However, if you want to be friends, you don't bother folks who are attempting to get inside their car when they get out of it after running errands or going to work all the time. Since then, I've relocated to a non-HOA neighborhood where there is much less drama, and I'm also saving $300 a month. Another elderly man in this community believes he's the president of the HOA, which doesn't exist. He writes these weird monthly newsletters on neon paper using size 12 courier font. It's a bulleted list of local doctors and pharmacist numbers, along with some elderly man jokes. By stating that house across from the empty lot on the corner of X and Y instead of giving the address, he chastises people in their yards in a passive-aggressive manner. Additionally, he distributes these corny yard signs that read Neighborhood Yard of the Month. Alright, B, try putting that in my yard and I'll stab you in the behind. I despise homeowners associations, HOAs, but much more so, I detest naive fools who mistakenly believe they're in charge of an association that does not exist. Please, just leave me alone, dingbat. Edit. This guy's placing his own pamphlets in people's mailboxes. Is that not against the law? We have mailboxes instead of newspaper tubes, so he drives around at 5 in the morning or something, opening people's mailboxes and stuffing them with his bogus newsletters. The U.S. Code for Crimes and Criminal Procedures prohibits the placement of unstamped flyers in any mailbox. Title 18, Section 1725 states that any person who knowingly deposits mailable matter without postage in an established letterbox shall be subject to a fine. Thank you, stranger. I'm going to report that idiot. Okay, here's a good one. Our HOA chose to redo the roads in halves. Because every road in our neighborhood has fire lanes, most of the time you can't park on them. In the Facebook group, people asked if they could be flexible and let them park in the fire lanes on the other side of the neighborhood for this one time. If not, they said they would be stuck in their driveways until the asphalt dried. They said no. They told us we could park anywhere outside of our gated neighborhood. A lot of people weren't happy about this because the area outside our gated community is, rough. The roads were finally fixed up, and people drove on through the gate and stopped outside. When they woke up the next morning, almost every car had been broken in half. Half of the cars had been spray painted, and other damage to the cars like keying, dents, and so on had been done. Some people took the HOA to court over this and won. For extra fun, one HOA member had a pest control truck parked in the fire lane outside of their house for hours, not even a week after the event. Because someone in the Facebook group told her she was doing it, she yelled at them for stalking her, telling everyone where she lived. I bought my townhouse mostly because it was advertised as not having an HOA. During my 4 years there, I only had to mow the hill behind my house because no one else was. Other than that, I had no troubles. That winter, there wasn't a lot of snow, so the roads didn't need to be plowed. There was then a letter in the mail from the county telling me that they would attach an alien to all of the homes in our development if I didn't get rid of the dead tree on my land. WTF was all I could think. It looks like the builder of our neighborhood was too busy rubbing his hands together with the money to hand over the HOA to the neighbors when the last unit sold. The phone number and the post office box were both broken, and the county had never thought to keep contact information up to date. They set up a new maintenance corporation because they couldn't have an HOA at the time. We all started paying $64 a year in dues to this new company. Not a big deal. As of 12 years ago, the restrictive covenants in our deeds had not been implemented. Trying to do so now would be prejudicial enforcement. Once the board is chosen, they take care of the maintenance company business, buy insurance for open spaces, hire snow removal services, work with the county to get rid of stormwater, and make sure the grass and landscaping are taken care of in our development's open spaces. Cool. After 2 years, the first president leaves office and a new president and vice president are chosen. The old holdover bookkeeper gave the new president the books so they could be checked. Do not return the books, hold a board meeting, or report the maintenance company's finances to the homeowners. Also, do not hold annual meetings of the maintenance corporation. I no longer pay my dues. A lot of other people feel the same way. It's been 8 years. After that, I get a formal notice in the mail. A management business is suing me for back rent. I take it to small claims court and lose badly. The judge tells me I can either take the maintenance corporation to chancery court, which will cost tens of thousands of dollars and could be slowed down or blocked by their lawyer, which would drain my bank account, or I can file an appeal with the Attorney General's office. I chose to complain to the office of the Attorney General. That took months of work and proof that I tried to work things out with the board in good faith. In the end, the AG's office sent every homeowner in the development a copy of the investigation opening document. 3 homeowners filed complaints with the AG's office, and my complaint alone was 105 pages. As soon as the board president and vice president get the AG's paper, they call a meeting of the whole company. They say they will hold a poll, but they don't. The investigation is still going strong at the AG's office, but the MC and their lawyer are getting in the way of it. Update: a lot of people were unhappy with the maintenance company, and as the Attorney General's investigation went deeper, it became a strong force for change. Like-minded homeowners came together, turning rumors of disagreement into a unified call for justice. The media's focus grew, shining a light on the bad management that had been plaguing the community. The growing public outcry led to action, which meant that the struggling maintenance company had to deal with the results of its carelessness. The once oppositional board reluctantly agreed because they were afraid of court trouble and community unrest. An emergency meeting was held, and a determined community that knew their rights better than ever showed up. The board members were cornered and had no choice but to step down. This was a turning point in the community's fight for power. After they left, an interim committee took over. The committee was chosen in a way that was open and free of any suspicion of bad management. The Office of the Attorney General kept working hard to get justice, with fewer problems from the board that was removed. After winning, the community was full of energy and quickly got things back to normal. The books were checked, openness was restored, and the faith that had been broken in the past started to grow again. As the bad times of the maintenance corporation came to an end, the town was on the verge of a new beginning. Thank you for subscribing, the likes, and comments. We're very happy to see you all in the comments too. Thanks for your support.